All right, good morning. We're going to read here in a minute or two after the kiddos exit. CJ is going to read. CJ, I think you got a passage without weird names.
I think so. But I got it just this morning, so you have to bear with me.
We're in Esther, chapter 3, page 412. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, just letting the kids exit. So here we go. It's verses 13 to 14. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day.
You want to read one more verse? 15 too?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Is it cheerier? The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion.
The city was in confusion. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate that. All right. Well, good. We will hold on to that thought and just remind you that we are Grace Life Bible Church. We're resilient disciples who are learning that spiritual maturity is about trusting God more, not just knowing more. Knowing more is important, but we want to lead that to trusting Him more. And so you can't experiencing His grace and growing in health and impact without knowing. I mean, knowing is where we start. We encounter who God is through His Word. We want to faithfully interpret it, understand it, right? We want to submit to it, and then that's the foundation for everything else that's good in life. That was a pretty broad summary. But anyway, okay, before I get started here, I want to thank you for taking a minute or two to fill out those surveys that you might have seen thrown around. Toby and I really want to understand where you're at, what's going on, so what we teach can meet some needs, right? So that's kind of what we're doing there. We're enjoying that. All right. So we are doing the book of Esther. Where is God? Have you ever felt like that? A season of life where you're like, where is He? I mean, if He was real and if He was good and if He was powerful, would I be experiencing this? I mean, that's not uncommon for us to think that way. And so the book of Esther has His fingerprints all over the book. And as we've said, His name is never mentioned. Prayer, never mentioned. Torah, never mentioned. And so it's a great question. Where is God? Because their story is dark and desperate. And so we do discover God's fingerprints all over the story. And so here's a quick overview. If you haven't been with us before, you're like, what in the world? But anyway, this is just history of the whole Old Testament. Well, really not much, but the kings, monarchy. You have King Saul, we have King David, we have King Solomon. And as those guys go on, Solomon dies, and when Solomon dies, the kingdom of Israel splits into the northern kingdom called Israel and the southern kingdom called Judah. Okay? There's 10 tribes in the north. Not a single king up in the north was good ever. And so because of that, in 722, the Lord used the power of Assyria to, keyword, annihilate them. Just gone. In all of Scripture, they never come back. They're just gone, okay? Meanwhile, down here in Judah, there's a few good kings. Solomon built the temple, and the temple goes on here. But Judah, they're rolling along. However, their disobedience leads to the exile. Now, exile means you're grabbed. They would usually strip you naked and tie your elbows together behind your head. You would dislocate your shoulders, put a rope between everybody, and you're walking to Babylon. Half of you would die. They don't care, okay? So it's not pleasant. So that Babylon takes over. They conquer Assyria around 612. And during Babylon's reign, you may have heard of a guy named Nebuchadnezzar. He comes in and crushes Jerusalem, burns the temple down, and Judah, at this time, loses sovereignty. They lose their land. They lose everything. And the temple is destroyed, specifically in the year 586. And it was built 70 years later in 516. Well, Cyrus, the king of Persia, he conquers Babylon about 539. And Cyrus issues this decree. This is a classic decree. I love this decree. And I'll just read it. I've mentioned it before. Now, in the first year, King Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord of the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom. And he said, "Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all kingdoms of earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you, his people, the Jews, may the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up." Again, you're going up to Jerusalem no matter where you are because high in elevation, okay? But Cyrus, the king of Persia, is like, hey, if you're still here, just go. And he actually funded them. He gave them money. Go back, build your temple. I love a couple things about Cyrus doing that decree, because 190 years before he was even born, listen to this verse in Isaiah. "The Lord who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, he shall fulfill my purpose, saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple, your foundations shall be laid." That's Isaiah chapter 44, 190 years before Cyrus was even born. That's great. Of course, now if you're a liberal, you're like, well, that just can't happen, so, and then you do funny things. But anyway, it's not a big deal for God to know ahead of time what's going on, all right? So, when Nebuchadnezzar was attacking and taking captives, he took the best people of the land. Here's a verse. "Nebuchadnezzar carried away all Jerusalem, all the officials, the mighty men of valor, 10,000 captives, all the craftsmen and the smiths." That's not like if your last name is Smith, it means you're a craftsman, okay? Like a coppersmith or a goldsmith. "None remained except the poorest people of the land." So the people that Nebuchadnezzar takes to Babylon are the same people that are stuck there under Persia. And they're the same people that we read about stuck there in the book of Esther. That makes sense? So it's good to know because that they're the smartest, the skilled people, the PhDs, the engineers. They are not, locked up in a dank, dark prison cell. They're sitting at their computer doing CAD designs and making stuff. And you know what I'm saying, okay? But the point is, they grow in wealth. They're comfortable. They're thriving, and they're prosperous. Okay? So not all of them hate being in New Persia. That's why when Zerubbabel, he shows up here in the first 6 chapters of Ezra, talks about his leadership. He says, hey, Cyrus says you can go. Follow me. I'm going. 50,000 people follow him back across the long journey back to Jerusalem to rebuild it and the temple. And then the story of Esther happens after the 50,000 people go back. And I've painted the picture before, but the questions is, can God find us here? At this time, they thought gods were regional. And so if Yahweh's back in Israel, I guess we're on our own. And so this book is blowing their minds because behind the scenes, even though God is not named, he is there. So in a land that doesn't name God, among a people that doesn't name God, in a story that doesn't name God, is God there? Oh yeah, his fingerprints are all over the place. I encourage you, if you haven't been reading Esther along with us, I just encourage you to pick it up, start reading. It is one of the strangest books of the Bible. It is just very odd. It's very engaging. I like it. It's kind of short. It's fun. But and then as you read it, just look for those fingerprints. Reversal is a big theme of Esther. Like the story's going this way, and then God, behind the scenes, whoop, it turns. You know what I mean? The Jews are going to get killed. Oh, no, they don't. And all that kind of stuff. So I invite you to read it. So, Esther, where is God? First week, we learned that God can be found in places where you least expect to find him, like Persia. Or Jesus. Jesus takes his disciples to Caesarea Philippi, the most perverted place that they knew about. And he says, on this rock, in this place, even here, anyway, can God find you? God can find you in places you least expect to be found. Maybe you're in a dark season of life, and you're like, I have made so many mistakes. I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know if I can go back to God. And he can find you wherever you are, okay? So that was chapter 1. And so here's kind of a review. Chapter 1, am I alone? No, you're not alone. God can find you, and you can find God. Chapter 2, we were asking, am I beautiful? Because Esther won a beauty contest, and we discovered that I'm beautiful not because I impressed the king, but because the king has already performed for me. He has sacrificed for me, right? So beauty is not just skin deep. It's based on your identity and who you are. The king loves you. And now, chapter 3, am I safe? This is the question today that we're going to get into, okay? So, am I safe? Well, what is safe, right? That's kind of an interesting question. Why would you say you're safe? This is really the tough question for today. Why are you safe? Well, I have lots of money. It's like an illustration. But money can just disappear. I'm safe because of my zip code. I live in this great place, and there's these gates and whatever. Okay, well, earthquakes, and no matter what you list, my health and this and that, whatever we list, I'm safe because of these external things. They can just disappear in a second, right? So why are you safe? That's what we're going to ask today. But really, we're invited to trust God with our safety when we're feeling threatened and insecure. That's kind of the underlying tone there. So in this chapter, it's fascinating. There's a little outline that kind of develops, and here's the outline. How can you be safe when the wrong people get promoted? How can you be safe when you get in trouble for not playing their stupid political games? How can you be safe when there's plots and conspiracy to kill you? And how can you be safe when the leadership doesn't even care? Okay, that's kind of chapter 3 in a nutshell, all right? So why are we safe? That's the story. This is the Old Testament, kind of a plot line, all right? So you have the beginning, Garden of Eden, everything's fine for a couple chapters, and then boom, we have the fall into sin, and then we have a promise, and we're starting to go towards hope. We have Exodus, the law, we have Joshua, Judges, Ruth, we have Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, all that, and then it just falls into failure. We have Assyria, Babylon, Persia here, and Esther is right there. Remember, the book of Esther is the last book chronologically in the Old Testament. By the time you get to Esther, everything in the Old Testament is already done. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, and so we're looking for prophetic hope, but that doesn't really show up until the New Testament. All right, characters in the book of Esther. If you haven't joined us yet, these are the main people. In Persia, you have a king named Ahasuerus. His Greek name is Xerxes. Same guy, two different names. And you have Ahasuerus. His number 2 man is Haman. Haman is very anti-Jewish. He wants to kill all the Jews. We'll get into why here. But then the Jews, Mordecai and Esther. Okay? Haman is Ahasuerus' number 2 man. Really ironic that by the end of the book, chapter 10, Mordecai is Ahasuerus' number 2 man. There's that reversal, okay? You want to look for that as you read it, okay? So Esther is a queen. She replaced Vashti. Won't get into all that, but that's where we're at, okay? And so it's important to understand that as you look at this, Mordecai and Esther, they're not the heroes of the story. It's not their fingerprints that turn everything around. It's God's fingerprints. And so we're not to look to Esther and Mordecai, let's be like them. Let's leverage our sexuality and kill 75,000 people. Like, no, that's not appropriate. We're looking to God and He's the hero, okay? Here's the Persian kingdom. It's 3,000 miles across. USA is like 2,800 miles across. It's a big place, okay? There's 127 provinces, and so all over the place. And just to review history, if you're into this thing, Xerxes' father, Darius, lost the Battle of Marathon. Xerxes becomes king. He's preparing to fight Greece, and so he has that 180-day pep rally and prep rally. He's preparing his generals and royal officials to invade Greece, but then Vashti is deposed. She's fired. She's demoted from queen to concubine because, remember, she's Mother Persia. She's representing the great, glorious political ambitions and military campaigns of Xerxes, and he says, hey, come out here and rally the troops, and we want them to buy into Persia, fight for Persia, sacrifice for Persia. And she says, yeah, no, I'm not into that. For whatever reason, we don't know. And so she's fired. he goes off and fights Greece. He's unsuccessful. He gets beat. He comes back, and he's like, oh, yeah, we don't have any beautiful woman to champion Persia, so Esther is hired. And I think that's kind of a tough job. Like, you lose the war, and your job is to be like, yay, Persia. Anyway, so Persia becomes queen, and then we're right in here. So that's kind of what's going on. All right? So, moving on, chapter 3. Let's go to chapter 3, verse 1. How can you be safe when the wrong people get promoted? You ever been someplace and some Yahoo bozo is promoted? And you're like, what are they thinking? Okay? Esther, chapter 3, verse 1. After these things, this is after 4 years. Esther has been queen 4 years. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of, Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all officials who were with him. So he's number 2. He's vice president. He's number 2, vice king, second in charge. And by the end of the book, Mordecai is second in charge. But it's interesting, he says, hey, it doesn't just say Haman, it's Haman the Agagite. Now remember back earlier, Mordecai was introduced not just as Mordecai, but Mordecai, and we have his whole genealogy. Mordecai the Benjamite, okay? So here's what's going on. Mordecai in chapter 2 was introduced as the Benjamite. Now that goes back to Jacob and Rachel, Benjamin. Kish was the father of King Saul, also Shimei. Now, Shimei was the guy that threw rocks at King David and harassed him and made fun of him and all that. And Jair named Mordecai, which means worshiper of Marduk, the Babylonian king. So this family's messed up. At some point, this family is like, I don't want Yahweh, I don't want Israel. The story probably went something like this. If he can't protect his own city, and he throws us over here in Babylon, I don't want him. He doesn't meet my expectations. Something like that. I could be wrong, but, that would be logical. And so that's Mordecai the Benjamite. But now we have Haman the Agagite, and Haman descends from Esau. Well, there was a little bit of tension between Jacob and Esau. He marries a Canaanite wife. There's Eliphaz, different Eliphaz in the book of Job. And there's Amalek. King Agag was the last king of Amalek. And in 1 Samuel 15, God told Saul, descendant of Jacob, a Benjamite, wipe out Agag. Wipe them all out for various reasons. And Saul does not do that. He spares the people, some people, the king, doesn't kill them, and there's just, valuable flocks and stuff. And then Samuel comes up and he's like, hey, God told you to wipe everyone. Oh, well, we did. Well, why am I hearing sheep? Well, I did these things, but the people, they didn't obey. Dude, you're king, okay? That was sort of like a message version, all right? But anyway, that's what's going on here. And so we have this tension here between this ancient feud between the Benjamites and the Agagites. Now, had Saul, way back in 1 Samuel 15, obeyed, Haman is not even here. We don't have the book of Esther. That's a good question. When I get to heaven. So, Lord, what if? Anyway, you get my point, okay? Haman wouldn't be here. He wouldn't be there to threaten because his plan in chapter 3 is to annihilate and to wipe out all the Jews, which, ironically, the Benjamite was supposed to wipe out all the Agagites way back when, okay? So that's what's going on there. So, verse 2. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. You better bow down. You have to bow down to Haman. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Interesting, okay? So, well, what happened to the last person that disobeyed the king? Vashti. She's just gone. What's going to happen to Mordecai? Ooh, what will happen to him, okay? This is a weird bit of history. Sometimes you read history and you're like, I didn't need to know that. It's not that bad. But just Persians of equal rank would greet each other by a kiss on the mouth. I mean, imagine you're watching CNN and you've got Trump and Putin, and they kiss. You're like, what? Anyway, that's just what they did. Equal rank. If you're slightly lower, you would kiss on the cheeks. Okay. If you have great difference in power differential, you would bow before the person, and that's what's going on here. The king said, everybody's beneath Haman. Everybody has to bow to him. No one's kissing him on the lips because there's no equal, all right? But the point is, this phrase, bow down, paid homage, the Hebrew for those two phrases, never occur together anywhere else except when describing a god. Interesting. Haman wants to be treated like a god. And later on, when Haman is like, well, the king says, who should be honored? What should the king do to honor a person? And he's like, well, the king's robes, the king's horses, the king's ring. He's like, I want to be king. So Haman has this huge problem with wanting to be treated like a god, okay? So all that, this is at, verse 2 says, the servants are at the king's gate. And just to give you a picture of it, a buddy of mine has a PhD in archaeology. I found this on his website. Super good. But this is the king's gate. This is where Haman is at. He's not just hanging out there. He has a job there. Remember when Esther becomes queen, he gets a job. He could be a judge. He could be some kind of a guard or doing something like a court official controlling access into the whole palace complex. All right. Anyway, but this is 130 feet by 100 feet, larger than most homes. Anyway. All right. Verse 3. The king's servants at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's command? And they spoke to him day after day, and Mordecai would not listen to them. They told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told him that he was a Jew. Now, this is interesting, right? Because for 4 years, Mordecai's been telling Esther, shh, don't tell anybody you're a Jew. And now he's like, hey, I'm not doing that because I'm a Jew. You're like, whatever, okay? But he's at the gate. And the servants are frustrated. They're probably a little bit accountable. If Haman's working at the gate and the servants are at the gate, and the king hears there's an employee at the gate that's not bowing down to Haman, obeying my command, they're like, hey, you guys, the team that's in control of the gate, what's up? Enforce my laws. So the servants are kind of feeling some pressure here, and because Mordecai's breaking this rule. But notice why Haman's doing this. It's because he's the Benjamite, and Haman is the Agagite. It has nothing to do with anything else. He's just like, I'm not bound down to that guy. No way. Okay? So, how can you be safe when plots and conspiracy emerge to harm you? Verse 5 and 6, and on to 14. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage, it filled him with fury. Look at this verse 6. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So, as the king's servants had made known to Haman, the people, the Jews of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom. Now, this is really interesting. He disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. He totally could have. He's second in power. You could kill somebody. You even have perhaps a legal reason. He's disobeying. But everybody knows the tension here. It's been going on for day after day. And they know if Haman just kills Mordecai, it's just a petty personal feud. Everybody would see that. And Haman can't be perceived as petty. So this was why it says he disdained. He's like, I can't just kill him. Because everybody would know what's really going on here, all right? So what does he do? He concocts this elaborate plan to kill the entire race of Jews. Because that would include Haman. Because that way I'll not be perceived as petty. I'll be a hero. I'll paint the Jews as some kind of threat. And then I'll solve the threat by killing them all. And I will be a hero, okay? So that's what's going on. And this plan kind of works until he builds a 75-foot gallows in his backyard to kill Mordecai. Then it's like, I don't think this is, I think this is personal, all right? Let me say it the positive way. I think this is personal. By the way, if Haman's plan succeeds, he wants to kill all the Jews in the Persian kingdom, which would include Jerusalem, Palestine, the line of David, the line of the Messiah. This is a big deal. And so God looks at this and says, yeah, no, this is not going to happen. A little bit like The Chosen. Chosen episode 3, season 3. Season 3, Episode 3. At Capernaum, I love the scene where Jesus is reading from the scroll of Isaiah, and he stops in the middle, and he says, "Today this has been fulfilled in your hearing," and the people freak out, and they eventually accuse him of blasphemy, and they march him up to a cliff to throw him off the cliff, and Jesus is standing there by the cliff, and he's being accused by Rabbi Benjamin. You have to recant. You said this, and you said that. What did you mean? You have to recant. And Jesus says, "I think I was pretty clear." I love that Jesus and the chosen. He's just, anyway. And then he just simply, he walks up to the two guys that were going to throw him off, and he says, "This is not going to happen." And he just leaves. I've always wondered, because it says in the gospel, it says, and he walked through their midst and just left. I'm like, what happened? And I think that's probably a good account of anything else. Just like, this isn't going to happen. So when God's entire plan of salvation is threatened by evil humanity and satanic desires, he's like, no, that's not going to happen. Okay, love that. Okay, verse 7. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lots, it's kind of like rolling dice, before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So kind of a complicated thing here. You go from the first month of their year, Nisan, to the last month, Adar. But let me test your hermeneutical Bible study skills. True or false question here. We just read a verse. Haman cast lots to determine the best time to kill the Jews. You don't have to say anything out loud. Don't want to embarrass you. Haman cast lots to determine the best time to kill the Jews. You're well, yeah, of course. Well, look at the verse. They cast pur before Haman. Haman didn't do it. He does not cast lots. He has they. They are the astrologers. In this culture, nobody is going to make a decision of this magnitude without consulting the astrologers and the servants that do that kind of stuff. Anyway, but they are looking for the right day to kill everybody, all the Jews, and casting the pur. The pur is a Babylonian word for lot. That doesn't help. A lot is a kind of a chance thing. They have found like little dice kind of things. They don't have numbers on them. They have little phrases of prayers on them. And it might be like draw the short straw. It might be something on a piece of paper, or they used to pull out arrows out of a quiver, all kinds of chance things. They're just looking to find out, what do we do? And just leave it to chance, okay? The Persian kingdom is very much based on chance, fate, allowing fate to do stuff, rolling dice, that kind of stuff. I think it's kind of tragic and sad that some Christians today live that way. They don't consult God. They don't engage with other people. They just kind of, this just happened, so it must be God's will. This is a Persian model, okay? God wants to engage in His Word and wrestle through decisions and those kind of things, okay? Anyway, so they cast the lot, and this, what Haman is doing, he's I'm just going to say rolling the dice because we understand that, like just to see what happens. Haman is rolling the dice to see when can he kill the Jews. And to the Jews, this is a big threat. But another reversal is, by the end of the book, this rolling the dice, blows up, and it turns into a big celebration of God's providential care. His thumbprints are on it, even though his name is not mentioned. That's in a couple chapters, okay? All right. And so they do it day after day, month after month, but the timing is really important here, okay? Esther's been queen for 4 years. They start rolling the dice like in January, and they stop in November. So, okay, they take about a year. But the deal is, the month of Nisan, that's when it says they start, right? The month of Nisan is the month of Passover. What's Passover? Passover is when they celebrated God's deliverance from Egypt, certain death in Egypt. And now, in Persia, they're starting in the month of Passover celebration of God's deliverance, and the enemy Persians are determining, can we kill them all? When can we kill them all? You get a little bit of tension there, right? And they roll the dice, and the answer is, like, December. Well, that gives everybody 11 months. I mean, you got 11 months to figure stuff out, to prepare. 11 months could be a good thing, right? I mean, but 11 months is also like Am I going to die? What's going to happen? I mean, have you ever been in that kind of waiting period where there's just this tension and you have this big looming thing that might happen? It's like not always a good thing, right? So there's a tension, but there's also the gift of time to prepare, okay? And so delays are sometimes in God's fingerprints, right? But how can God's people be safe in a time like this? We've already seen his fingerprints. We saw them in a marital squabble. It was because the king and his queen Vashti got into a spat that she was fired and creates a vacuum that Esther steps into. That's God's fingerprint. We saw at a beauty contest that somehow Esther bypasses everybody, finds the favor of the guy, I forgot his name, that manages the women, and she wins as queen, and so she has a platform with the king. And at the job site, Mordecai overhears this threat. These two guys are trying to kill the king, and he reports it, saves the king's life, although providentially, the king never heard about it until later. And right now, in chapter 3, verse 7, he is in the roll of the dice, okay, to give them time, almost a year, and not to be annihilated just the next day, okay? So, Persians were generally tolerant. Cyrus came in, there's this thing called the Cyrus cylinder, you know, those wooden things you roll out flour to make bread. It's kind of like that, except full of writing, and they would roll it on clay. The Cyrus cylinder, he goes on and brags about I am great and kind, and I didn't oppress and torture anyone like Assyria would do. And so he's known for being very tolerant, giving the Jews money, go back, just get out of here, and didn't kill people like as much as Assyria. Okay. But here, Haman is really intolerant, so he doesn't really fit his own kingdom, all right? So he has to trick or bait the king into being intolerant, right? This is what's going to happen, and he's pretty brilliant. So in verse 8, Haman says to King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people, a certain nation scattered abroad and dispersed among the nations in all the provinces of your kingdom. People, nation, same word, okay? And so Haman is saying there's an unintentionally dispersed people in your kingdom that's intentionally unassimilated. They are not Persians. They don't do Persian things. They're everywhere, okay? Interesting, because by definition, a nation has land, right? I mean, how can you have a nation if you don't have a place? I mean, that's like one of the first rules. And so Haman is like, there's this nation here. They don't have land, but they're spread all over the place. How did they get spread all over the place? That goes back to Assyria being wiped out and Babylon. And so in 722, Assyria swoops in and they take people and they transported people back all over the Middle East. Persia, Babylon, way up here, okay? So just in your mind, understand that when Assyria came, killed most of them locally, but captured a bunch of people and just spread them out. Then they would take foreigners and dump them back in Israel. And so now if you're an Israelite, not killed, you're lucky, but you're there, and all of a sudden your neighbor is some dude from Media, you got different language, different worship, you can't rebel, you can't even talk to the guy, okay? What happens here is the Jews in Israel that now live next to all these foreigners, they get married and have kids. Those kids are not pure Jews. They're not following Yahweh, and they are called the Samaritans. In the New Testament, this is the origin of the Samaritans, and this is why people in the New Testament hate the Samaritans, because they're going to point to the Samaritans and say, you're the ones that are destroying our bloodline. You're the ones that defect from following Yahweh. That's just a bit of background there, okay? So that's what's going on with that, okay? And then Nebuchadnezzar, as we know, attacks, and Mordecai's father, as I already mentioned, probably not a faithful Jew, defects from that, worships Marduk, and we already know that Nebuchadnezzar took the skilled craftsmen, metal workers, men of valor, 7,000 men of valor, the craftsmen, metal workers, 1,000 metal workers, and so he takes all these people. And so the point again, the people who are stuck here after Zerubbabel's 50,000 return in the story of Esther, they are educated, engaged, wealthy, and so that's what's going on there, all right? So anyway, so Haman is making up this thing to the king. He has to persuade the normally tolerant king of Persia to become intolerant. And he says, well, there's this people. There's a nation out there with no land, and they're spread all over your kingdom. And number two, their laws are different from those of every other people. Well, dude, your province has 127 people. You're going to have different laws, right? That's kind of a weird thing to say. But remember, he's trying to get him to become intolerant. And then not verse 3, but the third point, they don't do the king's laws. Okay, now that's maybe actionable. So this is what Haman is saying. There's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in your kingdom. So it's a nation without land, and even though they're a nation without land, they have their own laws. That is really an enigma, isn't it? You got these people with no land, but they're maintaining their own distinct cultural identity. They have nationhood, all right? And so it's a nationless nation with nationalism. A nationless nation with nationalism, okay? So this is what Haman is pitching to the king, all right? And so he concludes, it's not to the king's profit to tolerate them. What language, right? You should just disappear them, as they say in Russia, all right? So if it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who are in charge of the king's business, probably revenue officers, that they may put it into the king's treasuries. Okay, super vague and passive language. There's a certain people, let it be decreed. But he says that they may be destroyed. Now here's the deal. Haman's probably doing a word sound trickery thing. Back when I was in Dallas, Texas, riding mountain bikes and all this kind of stuff, I took my mountain bike to the shop, had to do some work on it. And so this guy, I knew him, I was in there all the time. He was from, I think, Chile, had this heavy accent, kind of a Hispanic accent, whatever they speak in Chile, Chilean, I guess. Anyway, he takes me to the cash register, and he says through his thick accent to the little kid, or the kid at the cash register, he says, give him 15% off. How much did I say? Well, the cash register heard 50% off, so he gave me half off. And then the guy's like, oh, I meant 15% off. That's okay, just let him go. I'm like, sweet. So anyway, the point is 15% off sounds like 50% off if you have an accent. Here in this verse, Haman is probably leveraging the confusion of sounds between to annihilate and to enslave. The Hebrew, the word here to annihilate is abidam, and the word to enslave is abidim. And so it's possible that Haman is just kind of talking fast and like, oh yeah, we'll just do this and abidim and da-da-da-da. And the king is probably thinking, well, yeah, we're going to slave him. That's what we always do. Very unusual to just nuke an entire race. That doesn't normally happen. So the king's probably not really on track with what Haman's doing, okay? That's just a hunch, but maybe, all right? And 10,000 talents of silver at today's price is $394 million. That's a lot of money, in case you were wondering, all right? At least in my economy, that's a lot of money. Where is Haman going to get this? He gets some of it from the national treasury, but he's planning on, in verse 13, he plans on plundering the Jews and filling the coffers with that, probably keeping a lot and then giving back some, okay? And so in the ancient Near East, confiscation of property always accompanies execution of people. You kill them, you take your stuff, the state gets it. That's just how it works, okay? Verse 10, so the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, the money, or maybe their money, is given to you, the people. Do whatever you want. He's probably so casual because he hasn't heard Abidam, he's heard Abidim. We're going to enslave these people. Okay? And then verse 12, the king's scribes were summoned the 13th day of Nisan, the first month, that's the month of Passover. An edict, according to all that Haman commanded now, was written to the king's satraps, the governors, the provinces, the officials, all the people, every province, its own script, its own language, in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Now this is the 13th of Nisan, which is the day before Passover. So that means on the day when all the Hebrew children are reciting the story of Passover, this edict is going out to destroy them all. And obviously the looming question is God going to be able to save his people now under this threat as he did the threat in Egypt that we're celebrating today. You see, it's just, again, this is God's thumbprint on the timing of this. You right? Where is God? Letters were sent by couriers to destroy, kill, annihilate. In case it was vague, destroy, kill, annihilate all the Jews, young, old, women, children, in one day, the 13th of the 12th month, Adar. So they have, the execution is 11 months down the road, okay? That's the point. So they have, why not just leave? Okay, well, this province is 3,000 miles wide, and you're in the middle of it, and you're going to just start walking. Maybe you have a donkey. There's no cars or subways, so you're going to be going through this province where everyone's out to kill you. You just can't leave. And if you do leave, everything you leave behind is gone. You lose it to the state. Okay? Verse 15, how can you be safe when leadership doesn't care about you? The very last verse, the couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king. Decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. The king and Haman sat down to drink. That's just kind of an odd thing. But the city was in confusion. I don't think the king really knows what's in the decree. You know what I mean? He's sort of like, take care of it, Haman, I'll just sign it here. Hey, let's go have lunch. Wow, all right? Okay, so this is a crisis. The city is thrown into confusion. And here's probably why. Because there are many nationalities in this kingdom. Even in Susa, the citadel, you'd have many nationalities. And they're probably looking over the fence going, whoa, what is going on? I mean, if the king is going to do that to this ethnic group, what about my ethnic group? Am I safe? I'm confused. I don't understand what's going on. This is unusual, okay? And so the point is, this is a crisis. When we're confused and when others conspire, we must take God into account. Look for his thumbprints. Look for his fingerprints. Is he here? Where is he? We are not alone. We're loved for not just what we look like, but for who we are, and so we're safe. Jesus says, fear not those that can kill the body, fear the one who has authority to cast into hell. And so understanding our safety is really dependent on understanding who to fear, okay? So we've talked in the past about how to see God's fingerprints in our life, and I've been thinking about this week, and I really enjoyed that. There's been multiple times where I just thought, and I go, wow, I think that's God's fingerprint. He is involved. And part of the key to remember and see God's fingerprints is to remember, to slow down and look back and go, yes, that happened, and we weave together a thread of seeing God's presence in our past, which gives us confidence in the present, even if we're in a crisis, okay? So remembering and thoughtfully looking back is huge. And so we're invited to trust God when we feel threatened and intimidated, but by reflecting on the past, I think that gives us confidence for the future. In fact, I just this morning I was thinking about this, and I go, you know what? I am ready for today's crisis because of the past fingerprints on my story. Whatever crisis, and I'm not boasting like I'm ready. I'm just saying God's presence in me makes me ready for today's crisis because his thumbprint has been on my past. In other words, he won't let any temptation take me that's too big. 1 Corinthians 10:13, right? So if you have a crisis, slow down and look at the past and see how God has prepared you for this crisis. His presence is with you, and he's probably done a bunch of things to enable you for this moment. It will be painful and all that stuff, absolutely, okay? So here's a quote. I'm reading this really good book called The Path. Even when we struggle to hear or feel God's nearness, he is still fully present within us. We never need to get back to God who is over there. He's always with us. We only need to trust this truth even when our feelings struggle to take it in. If you find yourself in such a season, breathe, relax. He is with you even if you do not sense it. It can be helpful in this place to ask, in what area might Jesus be inviting me to trust right now? He's interested in us trusting him. And that means he's going to put us in seasons like the book of Esther, where I don't see him. He's not doing what I think he should be doing, okay? And yet, if we slow down, take in his word, think about the past, we can maybe see his fingerprints, okay? And so we're invited to trust God and his word when we feel insecure or threatened. And so here's the answer. Why am I safe? I'm safe because I am not alone. That was chapter 1. I am loved, chapter 2, and God knows my future and has his fingerprints on my story long before I encounter a crisis. That gives us hope. Christianity can't promise you'll never have a problem. In fact, it's the opposite. Because we're connected to Jesus, the enemy hates us, we don't fit in the world, and there's problems to refine our character. Somehow that never makes it in the gospel passage, or the little hand, the little books, tracks, all right? Anyway, that's what's going on there, okay? So, key questions. Why do you think you're safe? What are you basing that on? Do you know how to use your faith in the dark? Dark seasons, around dark characters that might try to conspire against you. Where do you go when you're threatened? Who or what do you trust in? Can you see God's fingerprint in your life? So those are some things that chapter 3 brings to us, and I'm glad. I'm glad that I can have the confidence that whatever crisis I'm facing, God's fingerprints have been part of that process, and with his presence, I can face it. And you can too. Lord, thank you for hope we have in you. Life is hard, the world is broken, and there are systems in place that are just flat out dysfunctional and strange, and yet we're here. We're stuck on this planet, and so we will run into objections and conspiring things, and you equip us, you indwell us, and your fingerprints are on our past to lead us to today. So help us just to tune in, abide with you, and to stay with you in the dark seasons and to enjoy your presence. Amen.